So welcome everyone, and thank you for spending your Friday lunch hour with us. The Mountain Housing Council Speaker Series is an opportunity to dive deeper into a variety of housing topics, from today's session on the housing continuum to past topics on short-term rental ordinances and key housing terms. My name is Christina Kind. I am the coordinator of the Mountain Housing Council, which is a program of the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation, whose mission is to connect to people and opportunities, generating resources to build a more caring, creative, and effective community. Many of you know us for our grant making and scholarship work. Our mission-based initiative work, in addition to the Mountain Housing Council, includes forest health and wildfire resilience through Forest Futures and family strengthening through the Community Collaborative. We are led by a visionary board of directors who are deeply engaged in the community, as seen here, and a very talented staff. Allison Schwedner, who is the director of the Community Collaborative, is joining me today and will be assisting in facilitation. Thank you, Allison. So the Mountain Housing Council brings together 29 diverse stakeholders listed here: businesses, local governments, community groups, special districts, and housing advocates. The goal of the Mountain Housing Council is to tackle the unique and pressing challenges of housing in our region, including availability, variety, and affordability, as identified in the North Tahoe Truckee Regional Workforce Housing Needs Assessment and the Regional Housing Implementation Plan. As you can see in this slide, our region and scope are characterized by the same boundaries of the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District, which includes the town of Truckee, the north and west shores of Lake Tahoe, and stretches westward to include Donner Summit and east to the California-Nevada state line. The goal for today is to give an overview of the housing continuum, discuss where there is need, opportunities, and challenges, as well as solutions. I'd like to remind you to keep your microphone on mute. Even though this format makes it easy to multitask, we encourage you to keep your cameras on and to be an active listener. The format for today's session will be about a 30-minute presentation, after which we will have time for questions. You can put questions in the chat box at any time. However, we will wait until the very end of the presentations to address these questions. This meeting is being recorded. And I just turned on translation and the transcript. So let me know if anyone's having any issues with that. The format for the meeting is being recorded in speaker view and can be reviewed after this session at mountainhousingcouncil.org. We recognize that there are many diverse opinions on today's topic regarding employee housing, and we ask that everyone treat others with respect. I'd like to give a quick overview on this series before introducing our speakers. This graphic might be familiar to you as it has been guiding our work for the past 6 years. The goal of Mountain Housing Council's Achievable Local Housing Framework, as seen on this slide, is to catalyze local conversations and innovations to address a range of housing needs in our region. The spectrum of needs ranges from those having no income, as seen in the orange on the left-hand side of this bridge, up to upper middle income earners at 245% area median income, as seen on the red on the right-hand side of this bridge. Since market forces and area median income change frequently, the upper limit of this bridge is tied to an annual housing needs assessment, which, if you follow us, we will be sending out communication for the next housing survey and needs assessment in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. Our latest assessment, though, showed that those earning 245% area median income can still not afford market rate housing in our region. To give you context, in Nevada County, a family of 4 earning around $241,000 in household income would find it difficult to afford the median home price in our region. This bridge also shows the range of housing types available in a community. In this series, we're going to dive deeper into housing options and types, each important for different people at different times in their lives. This graphic shows a housing continuum, which is just a different way of looking at the bridge in the previous slide and the housing types needed and available in a community. The housing continuum is universally used by governments and community-based organizations as a framework to better understand the housing challenges and opportunities present in a community. You can Google housing continuum and find a plethora of information. We've adapted our thinking from the United Way of Halifax, and the link is in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, which I will send after this presentations today. The list of housing types shown in this slide is not meant to be exhaustive. The continuum is meant to illustrate a general understanding of the type of housing we need as a community. As you know, we have community members who have no housing, as seen on the left-hand side of this continuum, to community members who are able to purchase their own house at market rates. In between are a variety of housing types. This includes emergency shelters, which provide short-term shelter, transitional housing, which is temporary, government subsidized housing that fixed rates based on income and is typically for households earning 80% of area median income and lower, affordable rentals and home ownership. And generally, this concept of affordable is different than the public housing concept of affordable under subsidized, and that generally the concept is when your costs, your monthly mortgage or rent and utilities is no more than 30% of gross household income. And some schools of thought believe it goes all the way up to 50%. And the continuum illustrated here doesn't show employee housing, which would be somewhere next to subsidized and affordable housing. So people can enter and move across the continuum at any point in time in their lives, depending on life circumstances and preferences. For an example, an individual might start unhoused, connect to services, and moved into subsidized housing, establish savings, and eventually purchase an affordable home. Or an individual may own a home, retire, and downsize to an affordable rental or subsidized unit. There are many reasons people may move right or left along this continuum. And I'm seeing questions in the chat, and we can provide that information to you after. So we need enough of all these different types of housing to be in a vibrant community. When we don't have enough, we see housing instability and insecurity. In our community, we have seen people leave the region because they cannot find housing, and employers suffer because they can't find enough employees. So in this speaker series, we're going to invite community leaders to dive deeper into buckets of housing illustrated here. In part one, we focused on unhoused, emergency shelter, and transitional housing. Here is a link to the recording. Oops, sorry. To that recording if you'd like to watch it. And today we're going to focus our attention again here on employee housing or employer-assisted housing. So employee housing or employer-assisted housing programs are programs where an employer helps employees with the cost of owning or renting a home, typically close to the workplace. This type of assistance is needed to keep housing affordable. It is a type of workforce housing, which in its very simplest definition is housing that is affordable for working individuals and households. Again, depending on your school of thought, no more than 30 or 50% of your gross income is spent on housing costs. If we look at our region, we know we have an imbalance of housing. Primarily, most of our housing is single family, as seen in this graphic, taken from our recent housing needs assessment. Single family is usually defined as an independent dwelling unit separated by a ground, wall, and roof. The unit isn't on land communally shared. For this reason, condos are generally not considered single-family homes, and oftentimes neither are townhouses. Because of our region's position as a premier vacation destination, we also know that a substantial number of our housing units, 21,000 according to our recent housing needs assessment, are second homes and vacation rentals that limit the availability of year-round housing for the local workforce. We know we need to get more creative to increase the availability of employee and workforce housing. There have been many creative solutions to workforce housing, including the recent formation and expansion of the Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency, programs like Lease to Locals, home preservation deed restriction programs in Truckee and East Placer County, caretaker and employee housing amendments in East Placer County, and down payment assistance programs like the Martis Fund. We also know that many of our employers don't have the resources to build or provide employee housing, and we know that aforementioned programs are helping and part of the solution, and yet we need more solutions like building and designing units that cost less to produce, that are smaller and more efficiently designed. In our region, there is a substantial need to house our seasonal workforce. In Mountain Housing Council's 2021 Housing Needs Assessment, there is an unmet need of 1,275 seasonal units, with most of the unmet need for studios and one-bedroom units. So for these two reasons, the need for alternative building types that cost less and the need to house our seasonal workforce, we have invited Jennifer Scharp and Samir Tuma to join us today to give us more information on what they are working on. First, we will hear from Samir Tuma and then Jennifer, and then we'll open it up to questions and conversations. So I'd like to introduce Samir. Samir is the founder and CEO of Kila Properties, a real estate development firm that has developed and operated properties and resort destinations in Northern California. He has been working on projects and community for more than 10 years and is now focused exclusively on lodging and workforce housing projects in the North Lake Tahoe community. Samir serves on the board of directors of the North Lake Tahoe Community Alliance and has been working with the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation and other partners on developing and launching the housing hub. And Samir, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Christina. Good morning, everybody. Nice, or I guess it's afternoon at this point. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces and meet some new folks. When Christina approached me about having this discussion, I was really excited because I think there's a lot going on in this space, and what we're trying to really focus on are these alternatives, things that are not kind of the standard build a house, build a series of houses, build multifamily housing. All of that is necessary, but we see, an opportunity to do some things quicker and actually get some units on the ground. So next slide, please. With the workforce housing challenges that we see today, there are some, fairly standard sets of obstacles, and everybody's aware of this. Costs are high, it's complex, the regulatory hurdles are high. And there's oftentimes, particularly in residential areas, a real pushback on significant dense housing. And so I think as we think about solutions and things we might be doing, it's obviously important to figure out, how do you address these obstacles? There are other obstacles for sure, but these are ones that are sort of consistently there. And, so we've thought long and hard about how do we address that? Next slide, please. So what the project that I'm going to talk about today is something that we're working on, a small shopping center that we purchased back in 2018. Many of you will know it. It's in the middle of Tahoe City. Some people will refer to it as the Pete and Peters Shopping Center. And in that shopping center, there are two buildings. One is a restaurant bar, which is Pete and Peters, longtime institution, been there forever, thriving business, and they've recently added some food to that building. The other building, historically, over the decades, has been used primarily for office, some retail, and most recently, a small gym. And what we're seeing, and again, not surprising to anybody, there's a huge shift in demand away from office and to some extent retail, and sort of in our community, almost limitless demand for housing, for workforce housing. So one of the things that this particular project allows us to address is one of the hurdles I mentioned before, which are costs. Construction is still expensive, but we're in the fortunate position of already owning the land and already owning the structure, the main building. So we're not starting from scratch. And I think this concept of adaptive reuse is one that could apply in many, many different types of structures that exist within the community. The other thing that's been helpful is, while the regulatory scheme is complex, this particular type of housing in this particular location is something that is supported already by both the county and TRPA. And they've got zoning codes that make it make sense, and density, which is significantly higher than it is in other areas. But because it's in a town center, the density makes sense. And lastly, again, if you try to put a dorm in the middle of a neighborhood, you may get more pushback. But because we're in a commercial area where there's already some density, not that there won't be any concerns, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're addressing the concerns that we've heard, but it's just much less likely to get significant pushback because it's not really in anybody's neighborhood. Next slide, please. And so what we're building here on this property is a dorm. it's important to, we've spent some time over the last several months meeting with many of the larger employers in the area, understanding kind of what they're looking for, what they believe their employees are looking for. And we've taken all that on board and really tried to build that into the design. So this isn't housing for everybody. This is a segment of the housing, that's required. Primarily younger folks, perhaps seasonal, but people who are more amenable to living in a sort of group living situation. Currently, as many of you know, and I know Jennifer is very acutely aware of this, oftentimes in order to house people, you have a whole bunch of single family homes spread out over different areas and, putting lots of people in those homes. And maybe that's not necessarily the highest and best use for those homes. It is by necessity done right now, but our thinking is that if we can bring people in out of those homes and into this kind of environment, it frees up the single family residences for, families or smaller groups and that sort of thing. A little bit about the dorm itself. Like I said, it's an existing building. It's 3,600 square feet. And under the regulations, we're actually not going as dense as we could, but we're going to be able to house 28 people in 14 rooms, 6 separate bathrooms and a community kitchen. And when I get to showing you kind of the layout of the place, I'll talk in more detail about some of the little things that we've done to hopefully create really a better quality of life for employees, and happier employees make better workers. And so we're really focused on not just throwing up a dorm that people crowd into, but really creating a nice environment that is comfortable and works for people. Next slide, please. One of the keys, I mentioned a couple of times, this is in the town center, and that's great for a lot of reasons. One is transportation. And, where roads are congested, it's a real challenge for the community. But by being in the town center, there's a lot of different opportunities for moving around that don't involve cars. And, in the summertime, when it's not snowing, bike paths and walking are more amenable. But in the winter, there's TART Connect. And so the idea is to primarily make this a carless development, where people use public transportation or human-powered transportation for getting around. The other thing that goes to sort of the quality of life that we think this presents to folks is, because it is in town, there's a lot of things that they can walk to that are fun, enjoyable, and also they'll be in town spending money and creating a sense of vibrancy in the downtown. And like I said, there's really very little parking that's required here because of the nature of the public transportation. So next slide, please. So this is the building. Some of you know it, some of you don't. On the left-hand side is the main building that will become the dorm. On the right-hand side, you can see just a little bit of the restaurant and bar that are just next door. Next slide, please. So I know this may be a little bit hard for people to see, but I just wanted to include it to give folks an idea of what we've done with an existing shell to make it a viable place for people to live. So the number of entrances into the facility, on the bottom, if you will, you enter into a hallway. There are 9 rooms on that side. Each of those rooms will house 2 people. And then on the other side, you have an additional 5 rooms, again, housing 2 people each. Then there's a main living, cooking, great room area. There are 2 full kitchens within that area to allow for the fact that there's a lot of people there. And then one of the other things we did is, in the middle, you'll see that there are 6 separate bathrooms. A lot of these congregate living facilities, large facilities, old dorms from college, you may remember big, huge rooms, and everybody sort of shares the shower and bath. And we felt like giving people a little bit of privacy when they're, when they're using the bathroom, it's just a nicer way to live. One of the things that's not depicted on here is outside of each room will be sort of a standard locker where people can store whatever they want to in there, whether it's gear or clothes for different seasons, what have you, but a lot of storage that's built into this. Next slide, please. A glimpse into what the interiors of the rooms will look like. We were specifically having these things designed so that takes up a minimal amount of space within the room, but provides kind of what people need. So it'll be a bunk bed situation. And as you can see, there's sort of two setups on each side. Each person living in that room will have their own closet, will have some shelves for various things, and there'll also be mini fridges in the rooms. While the kitchen does have 2 large refrigerators, we felt like for 28 people, some will want to have some of their own stuff that they keep in their room that's not sort of in the communal refrigerators. So we'll put the individual refrigerators in there, and we feel like that'll be a big plus to people. So that's really the dorm and kind of the fundamentals about it. I just have one more slide here, which I want to talk to and if we go to that slide, on the back of that building. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you see that same building from the back. And on the back of that building, we are building an A-frame. This is sort of another alternative construction method. It's a kit that we purchased from a company that's originally from Europe, but has a presence in the United States. Fairly, really, really well designed, pretty easy to permit because of the design and the constructability, and it does meet all the California codes and even meets the Tahoe codes. And this is it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 732 square feet. So sort of fits the affordable by design mode. And it'll be brand new. And it'll be, it'll sit on the back of this building and look out across the golf course and the ridge line in the hills. So it'll be quite a nice setting. And what we're contemplating with these 2 buildings is what we've done is we've offered it to several employers around the area who might master lease the whole thing, and perhaps in the A-frame have it's a little less dense housing. It's a little more comfortable environment for some. So we've talked about potentially an on-site manager who is also working for the company, perhaps living in the A-frame, 1 or 2 other people, and then just being in proximity to the dorm. So managing any issues that might come up. So that's really it as far as, kind of a high level presentation on what we're trying to do, how we're trying to accomplish it. Christine, I'm not sure if you want to do individual questions after each presentation or wait till Jennifer's done hers, but happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks. I was thinking you'd wait till the end, but I see the 2 questions in here about the A-frame, and that seems appropriate. So if you want to answer those 2 right now, we can go ahead with that. So Aaron in the chat box asked, can you share the name of the company that provided the kit? And Max asked if you could share info on the A-frame. So the kit. So if you want to talk to that or put it in the chat, Samir, I'll leave that up to you. Yeah,
the company is called A-frame with a V instead of an F. If anybody has any struggles finding their website, they do have an A-frame, and then they have an A-frame USA. And they have slightly different models that they offer in different locations. So you'd want to look at that. But we found it. It comes as a kit. Everything's pre-cut. It's ready to go. All the structural pieces are there. You have to make a few modifications in order to make it work in Tahoe, as is always the case. But we found working with the A-frame folks. Yes, thank you, Aaron, for putting that. That is the link. But with working with them, we found them to be very accommodating, very interested in in using this as kind of a way to perhaps get into our market. Just as a side note, we have 2 single-family homes that we're renting out right now through the Landing Locals program, and we're planning to put A-frames on each of those as ADUs. So then they come in various different sizes. This one is sort of a little bit smaller. They range up to certainly over 1,200 square feet. I think 1,200 is the max for ADUs in the basin. But great company, super easy to work with, and very easy to permit.
That's great. Thanks, Samir. John, I see your question in the chat box. We'll wait to address your question until after Jennifer's presentation. So we'll move on to Jennifer, and then we'll start questions with John and then open it up to other questions. So next, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Scharp, who's the Human Resource Director at Palisades, Tahoe. Jennifer has worked as a human resources professional for 30 years, over 25 of them in the Tahoe area, including at the resort at Squaw Creek, now Everline, Vail Resorts, and for the past 5 years at Palisades, Tahoe. She's been involved with the Mountain Housing Council as a partner since its inception, at first with North Star and now with Palisades. She's lived in Truckee with her husband and 2 young adult sons for over 25 years. Like so many, she has a wish for our community to be a place her sons can live, thrive, and call home for years to come. And attainable housing is core to that being possible. So thank you, Jennifer. I will advance to the next slide, and I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. And thank you, Samir, for your presentation. That's a great project you've got going over there. Okay, so skip to the next slide, if you could. I thought I'd start by just sort of level setting for everybody and provide a little bit of context about Palisades Tahoe and our employee base and sort of what we're up against with regards to housing. So at our peak, our goal each year on headcount is generally about 2,600 employees. And we actually hit that number this year, which is fantastic. We have about 900 people return every winter, which is an incredible retention rate. A lot of locals, which is fantastic. And the bulk of those 900 people do live in our area. Which means that generally speaking, they have housing, which is fantastic. Every year we have, and these are all plus or minuses depending on the season, about 275 international workers, and this would be comprised of J1 visas and also H-2B visas. And those H-2B visas can be anywhere from a seasonal visa to a 10-month visa. Then on top of that, we have about 400 year-round people. This is full-time year-round folks. So these would be like our core, benefited group that's here summers, winters, spring, and fall. And again, a little bit of a different housing context for those folks, because like our returners, generally speaking, their housing is secure. Although we do know that in our community, even that can be a challenge for the people that think that they have secure housing, come to find out not so much when the owner wants to sell their home or condo or whatever house that they're in. And then finally, we'll layer on top of that with about 1,000 seasonal team members. This would generally be domestic employees, meaning that they're not international workers coming in on a visa, that layer on top of the above to get us to about 2,600 employees. So I wanted to set that context because if you want to skip to the next slide, we've really, with Altera's support, have put a lot of resources and energy into our employee housing program. We've hired a full-time year-round workforce housing manager, as well as a full-time year-round workforce housing coordinator to support that manager. And we intend to actually build out that team as we build out our housing. And since we've really put more to this effort, one thing that has stood out that we've learned kind of the hard way is that the need for housing is very diverse. And so I think, Christina, when you put up that slide talking about the housing continuum, that is something that we learned very quickly, is that there is not a one size fits all even for our employees, based on the previous slide. So our goals generally are to meet the demand for workforce housing by first recognizing that the housing needs differ by employee type and individual circumstances. There's no one size fits all for us as an employer, especially of our size, when it comes to solving for the housing problem. Our efforts are centered around securing a variety of housing types to meet the diverse needs of our team members. So when we are looking for housing or considering housing for our employees, one thing that is top of mind for me is how is that potential solution that's coming to us going to fit the various needs that we have out there for our employees. So what I wanted to do next was sort of run through some of the things that we've been doing this year, and then I'll round out by kind of talking a little bit about our vision going forward. So if you want to skip to the next slide. So we have a couple of different things that we've implemented this season with regards to employee housing. So on site, we have 38 beds. They're kind of tucked away, kind of the bottom of the tram face over here. And this solution is really popular for our seasonal and international employees. It is not palatial by any means. They are very old buildings, but they serve a purpose in that they're inexpensive, they're very simple, and they're on site. So for the seasonal and the international employees that don't mind a higher density, something that Samir was referring to, not everybody wants to live in sort of a dormitory or a bunk style solution, but the on-site is popular for the seasonal and international employees. And it also has provided sort of that transient landing spot that Christina, you were talking about on that continuum. If we have people that come in and they intend to find a space to live on their own, but they just need something for a couple weeks or a month, generally in the off season, meaning the spring, through the summer, this is also a good landing spot for those folks. We have 2 locations for those 38 beds. On the top there is what we call Mountain House. So it's sort of a 3-plex. And then at the bottom there is what we have is Courtside. Don't ask me how many units are in there because I don't know off the top of my head, but between the 2 of them, there are 38 beds. And if you want to skip to the next. Okay, then we have our master leases. And this season, we have master leased or ski leased 7 single family homes or condos. They're kind of spread all around North Lake Tahoe, along with 2 hotels. And between those 7 single family homes and condos and the 2 hotels that we've master leased for the winter, together, that's 163 total beds. For now, these master leases that we've obtained in the past and this season have been for the winter only. But we're starting to see some interest from owners and some of those partners that we have in these master leases to go into a year-round situation. We find that these master leases, they take a lot of, they're very burdensome from an administrative standpoint. Our housing manager does a fantastic job managing all the stakeholders that are involved with these master leases. But we do find that they are a great solution because they're diverse. Again, it's diversity, diversity, diversity. So these master leases range anything from, a hotel room essentially with a shared kitchen, sort of like a dorm style, to an actual very large home where people are living together as roommates. We found that these are generally a win-win for us and the property owner. We like having the diverse living situations, and most commonly for the property owner, they like having the comfort of knowing that there's a housing manager dedicated liaison between them and us, and also that a company, of our size is behind the lease. Depending on the landlord requirements, these homes and condos work well really for all employee types, as long as the tenants, can get along. We do run into that sometimes too. And then the hotel or dorm style leases work well generally for the internationals and seasonal staff. And again, mostly that's because they're more dense and in a shared kitchen situation most commonly. Okay, so next slide. All right, so this is a property that we purchased. Gosh, it's been not quite a year ago. This is a little property on North Lake Boulevard in Kings Beach, right before the uphill to go to State Line. This has been a good addition for us. It's 8 units in Kings Beach. There's a variety of units there ranging from studios. I think there's 1 or 2, well, there's 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedroom units. So there's a good variety there. We really wanted to focus on this property for long-term tenants. So we sort of saw this as a place where people could hang their hat and know that they were going to have some stability in their housing and they weren't going to have a lease yanked out from underneath them. So we have filled this property with the exception of 1 because a pipe broke and flooded the unit, which we are working on. And, but other than that, all these units are filled and they're filled with full-time year-round employees that are glad to be there. It's like a little community. It's cool. It's right across the street from the lake. And again, it's nothing, actually the units have a variety in themselves too. Some of them are small and a little more rough and therefore cost less. And then some of them are larger and actually finished out really, really nicely and they cost a little more. So even within that property, there's a nice diverse choice of price point, size, and quality. The other cool thing about this property is several of the little units have a fenced yard. So we know how much people love their dogs, in particular up here. And again, you know, people who are making this place their home and want a long-term home generally want to have a dog. And so this property allows for some of that as well, which has been awesome. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this one, this has gotten a lot of attention, as I think a lot of you may know. The Granite Flat Campground. This is the 2nd year that we have entered into a special permit with the U.S. Forest Service to, I guess, lease a portion of the campground during the off months when the campground isn't operating as a campground. We have 20, and again, this is plus or minus because sometimes like this year we have fewer sites because there's so much snow. You got to put the snow somewhere because we're plowing the property. On lighter years, we might have more, but I called it just for the sake of this conversation, about 20 campsites on Highway 89. I'm sure you're all familiar with where it's at, but it's more toward the Truckee side. We were able to enter into this special use permit under, and like, don't quote me on this. I had to ask, like, what was that again? Section 7 of the Granger-Tye Act allows for special use permit with the Forest Service. The cool thing about this type of agreement and this permit is that the fees that we pay to the U.S. Forest Service are required to be turned back to making improvements to the campsite. So I know this year, one of the things they did was better food storage out there. Certainly one of the pieces of feedback that we've had from the tenants is only one camp spot has power. So we are really looking into working with the Forest Service to expand electricity out there, certainly like showering and toilets and those sorts of things. There are very minimal facilities out there, but we do plow the roads. There's a special gate so that only the tenants can get in. Whatever living space folks want to use out at Granite Flat, we inspect it. And we provide a CO detector, smoke detector, and fire extinguishers for all of the tenants. And we do go out there and inspect from time to time. One of the things, because, you know, I pay attention to, I look at all the stuff and, you know, there's been some commentary out there that, I mean, oh my God, has it come to this, that, you know, Palisades is really putting people out in a camper in a campsite. And I think it's really important that people know that one of the reasons we went after this is because people were asking us for it. You know, it's not a lot of people, but enough people that we went, well, this is interesting. Maybe we should try and put something together. And specifically, we had a lot of potential or actual employees that were asking to stay in our parking lots as a housing solution. And we can't do that. Our permit doesn't allow us to do that. And so, you know, we really went after this granite flat solution in response to the requests and inquiries that we were getting from people that wanted that. And we know it's not for everybody. We know it's not going to be the, you know, silver bullet, ace in the hole for everyone. But we thought, why not? You know, if people are asking us, we're going to try it. And if it works, that's fantastic, even if it works for a few. And if it doesn't work, then we tried. So this is an interesting one. And I think it's something that we'll probably continue with, at least for the next year or two. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so looking forward, I mean, I think this is probably like goes without saying, but you know, I'm really proud of the partnerships that we've formed on this housing front. In particular, over the last 2 years, we've worked really hard, and CJ Bueller is our workforce housing manager. I think he's on this call, but he's done just jumped in with both feet. Very dedicated, very passionate. So we intend to continue with the partners and programs we have in place while actively pursuing new opportunities. We are looking for opportunities, whether it be a lease or a purchase, and we have a ton of support from our team in Denver with Alterra. We're going to keep an eye on that diverse, or the spectrum, as Christina showed. On the, what would it be, the far right hand of that spectrum, we have a couple things that we're looking at to investigate that might be a good fit for a home purchase support model, a lease to own, or mortgage assistance, or down payment assistance, or something like that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we can't do any of this without boots on the ground and support. So CJ has been here. He started in October, November. He's done a fantastic job. Some of you may have spoken to him. He's got great support in his coordinator, and probably we're going to need to throw some more resources to that team as we grow our workforce housing. And that's all I have. I hope that was helpful, or at least somewhat informative.
Thank you, Jennifer. It was definitely helpful and informative. I thank you, Samir and Jennifer. I really appreciate both of you joining us today. And for everyone on the call, as you can see, just with even in their programs, the diversity of housing stack. And I really appreciate, Jennifer, you saying that, you know, it's not for everyone, each of these housing types, but it could be for someone depending on the circumstances in their life. And so that was a great overview. And as I said, we'll open it up now for questions. We have about 15 minutes for questions. And John, I know you had a question earlier in the chat for Samir, so I'll start with you, and then I'll make my way down the chat. If anyone wants to put a question in the chat, please do, or you can raise your hand using the hand raise feature on Zoom, or you can just do it the old fashioned way and raise it in the screen, and I'll look out for it. So John, let me just scroll up to get to your question. Your question was, how will you enforce the no car policy? And that was when you were talking about the boarding house, Samir, in Tahoe City.
Yeah, John, great question. So our intent here is to master lease this facility to probably one, maybe two employers. Part of that will be developing a set of what we call house rules that govern a number of different things, quiet times and those sorts of things. But the parking piece is something that, you know, people will sign something that says that they will not park there. Of course, we know that people sometimes don't always play by the rules, so we'll have to we'll have to deal with that. But there's a couple of things. One is that there will be 2 parking spaces that are dedicated to the combination of the dorm and the A-frame, because we anticipate that probably somebody living in the A-frame may be more of a manager type, needing to get around more, going to different places. So they'll have a parking space. The other thing that we're contemplating with the second parking space is the possibility of a car share. Zipcar is the kind of company I think some are familiar with, but we recognize the fact that by and large, day to day, people can get around walking, biking with TART, etc. But there's a need from time to time to have a car. So that's a possibility that we're looking into, depending on who we partner with. And then the other thing is some of the folks that we've talked to who have larger parking facilities at their facility, resorts, hotels, etc., have said, well, perhaps that if people do have cars and they need them from time to time, they could leave them at the resort or at the hotel and retrieve them as needed. But the other thing is, we're in the town center. We're constantly having to kind of police the parking. And we certainly anticipate that the owner of the bar and restaurant, who having parking is integral to their business, they'll be on the lookout. And so, if we see cars that are parked overnight, sometimes cars get parked overnight because someone leaves the bar and it's better to leave their car there than to take it home. But if we're, we'll monitor that. And if we're seeing consistently cars that don't appear to belong or belong to people living there, we'll address that and they'll have to remove them.
Great, thanks, Samir. And then Jason, you had put in the chat earlier, you wanted the rough estimate of household income for 80%, 195%, and 205% actual income levels. And we have that on Mountain Housing Council's website. So I just dropped the link in the chat box for you. Going back to the chat box, there were some comments in here regarding the overview. So Katie Rice said, yes, great overview. Jason's asking Samir and Jennifer if you would be willing to provide your email addresses. Angela is saying, thank you, very helpful. Heather is saying, very helpful. Thank you, Jen, great to see you. Next question is, Jennifer, are there program guidelines for the Granite Flat project? And if so, can you share them? Mammoth Lake is considering a similar program, and guidelines from other successful programs would be very helpful.
Sorry, I think I need a little bit of clarity. Are you talking about, when you say program guidelines, are you speaking about the type of like unit that somebody wants to park there?
This is Nolan from Mammoth Lakes. The program guidelines is kind of the general rules and requirements for the people staying there. It's similar to, I think, a safe parking project, even though it's, targeting a different audience. So dealing with, drugs and alcohol, pets, length of stay, when they can come and go, kind of all the fun details that come with a project like this.
Yeah. So very generally speaking, the length of stay is really dictated by the duration of the permit. So we generally obtain the campground, mid-November, and then we need to be out of there by generally mid-April. So it's not a summer solution, which is kind of a bummer, but because it's, it'd be so much easier and nicer to stay there in the summer when the river's right there and it's beautiful. But so that is the duration of stay. We do have the tenants of the campground sign a license agreement, pretty much exactly like we do for all of our other tenants and all of our other housing. So it's a little bit different than a lease, it's a license. I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe that tenants can have one pet. It cannot run loose or be free, on its own. And, all the drugs, alcohol, community behavior is outlined within the license that we have them sign, again, similar to any of the other housing solutions that we have. And, knock on wood, I don't know how many of you out there have ever managed employee housing, but it's a hoot sometimes. There's some good stuff that goes on. And the campground has been pretty copacetic, and probably because there's not a ton of people there. So really, we haven't run into really any problems out there at the campground. They're a pretty chill crew out there. I don't know if that answers your question, but I will provide my email address, and Nolan, you're welcome to reach out to me if you have more questions or want more information.
Great, thank you.
Sure thing.
Nolan, did that answer your question? Did you have any follow-up questions?
No, I think that gives us a good overview, and then I'll likely reach out to her if we have some follow-up. We've talked with the ski area and about a similar program, and they actually informed us about this program as well through their HR department. So through their contacts, obviously with Alterra, yeah, we're looking at kind of a similar one, but not necessarily in a campground, because our forest isn't as willing to work with us as other forests.
Well, thank you. And then Paola, I'm not sure if I understand your question, but it says, is there an option for a local company to work under the W-9 since living in Truckee is good for this situation? And Samir, Jennifer, if you understand it, I'll let you take a stab, or Paola, if you wouldn't mind just kind of elaborating on what you're asking.
The main idea is to see if since there are locals, people living here, but not working like normally, right? You know, working under.
Oh, like as a contractor?
Exactly. Yeah, a different way to open, have the opportunity to work, you know, since living in Truckee, we don't have any problem to work here. That's the question.
So are you asking if they would consider opening it up to other businesses who may not be affiliated with Palisades, and to if they could contract with Palisades, if that employee housing would be available to the contractors?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I guess my answer to that would be, you know, nothing is ever always off the table, right? And it would be totally circumstantial. Unfortunately, the reality is that we have, I don't know, what did we secure? Let's just say 215 beds this year across all of the things that I just showed you, which is a lot more than we had even last year, and it's still not enough. So as much as we would love to do that, and I would say, you know, depending on how some of our acquisitions shake out over the course of the next couple months or years, the one thing I would throw out there is there may be an opportunity for Palisades to sublet on our off seasons, right? Because if we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of beds that we need in the peak season, you know, TBD if we can fill those beds, that many beds in the off season. So there might be some opportunity there. And like I said, nothing is always off the table. I'm always happy to partner and talk and vet things out. But right now we have a greater need than we have housing.
And Samir, oh, sorry. And Samir, do you want to touch a little bit about your boarding house, of who you're, who could potentially live there and what the plan is for that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that we've looked at it in a few different ways. We're having discussions with a few of the larger employers, but we've also had some discussions with owners of small businesses who might band together to essentially master lease. One of the things we just don't want to be in the business of doing individual leases to individual people, because the nature of the environment where people are in a dorm, you want compatibility, you want people who sort of are a similar mindset, but also people who are responsive to their employer. And so part of this, we think, to make it work and keep it harmonious, doing it through a master lease is the way that we want to do this. And I think the other thing is, because it is in the town center, there'll be some visibility there. And so we want it to be a nice, peaceful environment. And when you start renting to single people, it just becomes a little bit more challenging to keep people adhering to the house rules, or what John was referring to with parking and things like that. So our intent is one or maybe 2 or 3 employers, but do it through the employers, not to the individuals directly.
And just to piggyback on that, zoning aside, how could somebody go, what would be a first step for somebody to try to do this in a place like Truckee, zoning aside, and how could they build it economically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's, building it economically is probably the most challenging piece. Again, if you have an existing facility, an existing building, it's still expensive, but it's more viable to take an existing building and create something like this. But you sort of can't do it zoning aside, because so much of it is important. It's important to understand, is what you're looking to do something that is compatible with the area that it's located in, and oftentimes that is a function of zoning. Like I said, I mean, the zoning that we're using here allows for 62 people per acre. Now, we're not coming close to that, but it's dense. And so that's not necessarily the kind of facility that would be compatible in a single family residential neighborhood. So you do have to look at that. The other thing is, if it's not an existing building, one of the things, we've got the A-frame, but we're also looking at more modular type of buildings that are often a little bit less expensive from a constructability perspective, but also they can go up much faster. And when you're developing a project, time is money. And in Tahoe in particular, you have such a short building season that you've got to get things up quickly. So modular is another thing that we haven't found the right partner there yet, but we're looking at options. And I think that could be something that would work in other environments where you don't have an existing building.
Thank you, Samir. So we have about 3 minutes left. And so if you do have additional questions, we probably have time for one more. But if there's more than that, you can feel free to email them to me. I'll put my email in the chat box. Or Samir and Jennifer, thank you both for including your emails. Feel free to reach out directly to Samir or Jennifer. And so, yeah, we'll take one more question. There's anyone who would like to raise their hand or put it in the chat box? And I think I see a comment in here by Scott about, the potential of taking housing away. And it sounds like, Jennifer, you guys have pretty clear guidelines in your license. I don't know if you want to talk about, if there is a process, if somebody were to lose their housing, it sounds like it would be that they weren't meeting those guidelines. But if you want to touch a little bit on that.
I mean, sure. Sorry, I'm reading Scott's comment. Responsive to your employer. So if an employee is harassed and complains, the housing can be taken away. Is Scott still on? Can you clarify your question?
Yeah, Scott, are you on? So let me look.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So my concern I have serious concerns with employee housing as a model of housing, because your housing where you live becomes tied to particular employment. You can't change your job for a better job. And if you're being harassed or exploited, particularly if you're someone in a vulnerable community, a woman who's being sexually harassed at work, you can't quit your job without losing your housing. And I'm concerned about the particular comment that was made in which, when you said responsive to your employer, by having the leasing for this not be on an individual basis, but only as an employee housing model. That seems like we're incentivizing a housing structure. We're prioritizing a housing structure in which the workforce is put into a permanently vulnerable situation. And I'm curious what anyone's thoughts on this are. Like, why is it that employee housing, rather than having housing for workforce housing, that is housing for people who work anywhere in the region's employers, is being prioritized, seems to be prioritized here?
So I believe that was when Samir was talking specifically about the boarding dormitory. And Samir, if you want to respond further to that comment.
Sure. No, Scott, I think, I mean, it's a very valid point. I don't know that one type of housing is being prioritized over another. I think the concept of this entire discussion is that it takes a variety of different housing options to meet the needs. So this is definitely not, the sort of one size fits all. We believe that the people staying in the dorm primarily will be seasonal workers, J1s, et cetera, who, so by definition, they come and go over time. It's not necessarily a permanent housing situation for them. I think at the end of the day, the types of issues that you're talking about, keeping a safe environment, keeping something where people aren't harassed, that's important. It's important to us as owners of the facility, and certainly I think it will be important to their employees. But ultimately, this may not be the right type of housing for people who are looking for a long-term, multiple-year housing situation. And that's where some of the other solutions that are being worked on may make more sense for those particular people.
Thank you for that thoughtful response, Samir. And thank you everyone for joining us. We've hit 1 o'clock, so our time is coming to an end, but a huge thank you for your time and expertise, Jennifer and Samir. We did record this. We will make the recording available on the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation's YouTube channel and on Mountain Housing Council's website. I also will send out the slides and the link to the recording in an email later today or early next week. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and especially to Samir and Jennifer, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Appreciate your time, and feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.